Okay, so hi everyone. We are going into what we call the arrest and the trials of Jesus. Okay, different versions. Sorry, different gospels like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John have slightly different accounts of the trials of Jesus. Okay, but if we combine them all together, we actually can see that actually Jesus went through 6 trials lah, out of which I think 4 are recorded in the book of Luke. Okay, um, so it's important to know that this whole class today, we are only going to be specifically talking about the arrest of Jesus' arrest, and then after that, his trials. Okay, because there are many things that happen during his arrest and also during the trials that he went through. Trials is perbicaraan. Okay, so the perbicaraan that he went through, many things that happened, different, he was exposed to different people, and his reaction to each person was different. And also the person that was trying him, okay, the judge, so to speak, or the leader, okay, so to speak, had a different response each time they met Jesus. So it's important for us to differentiate between the trials and to see what we can learn from what Jesus went through. Okay, so that's our focus for today. So before we begin, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, even as we look into the events surrounding your arrest and also the trials that you went through before you were crucified, help us, Lord, to be mindful of what you have gone through for our sake, and help us, above all, to learn the lessons that you want to teach us today through the trials that you went through. So that, Lord, in knowing you a lot more, we may grow to love you more and to be more like you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so let's begin. Let's begin by looking at the arrest of Jesus, which is found in verse 47 of chapter 22. Okay, verse 47 to verse 53. Okay, it is where we left off lah. So before this, we saw that Jesus. Before this, we saw the Last Supper, and then of course the big drama that happened. Okay, Jesus predicted the one person will be, one person will betray him, and after that the disciples got into a big argument about who was the greatest and everything. And after that, after they finished the Last Supper, they went out to the Mount of Olives, or traditionally known as the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus went to pray, and he told his disciples to pray. But after Jesus went and prayed and he came back, he found the disciples sleeping. Okay, much to the exasperation of Jesus lah. Okay, so Jesus was like, oh, kenapa ba dengan saya punya anak murid ni tidak pandai mendengar cakap? Okay, so and this is the setting in which we are at. Okay, Jesus is already praying so hard. Okay, and when he go back and he find his disciples sleeping, he got very, very annoyed. Okay, and he ended by saying, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you will not fall into temptation." So the temptation that Jesus is referring to is the events that we're going to see soon. Okay, so let's begin. Since Tristan is not here, usually we will start with Tristan first. Let's start with Alan. Okay, Alan, Carl, Eugene, and so on and so forth. Let's take 2 verses each. Okay, from verse 47 to verse 53.
The arrest of Jesus. Jesus was still speaking when a crowd arrived, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. He came up to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you betray the Son of Man?"
When the disciples who were with Jesus saw what was going to happen, they asked, "Shall we use our swords, Lord?" And one of them struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear.
But Jesus said, "Enough of this." He touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and the elders who had come there to get him, "Did you have come with swords and clubs as though I were an outlaw?"
I was with you in the temple every day, and you did not try to arrest me. But this is your hour to act, when the power of darkness rules.
All right, thank you. So, so we find these events happening surrounding the the arrest of Jesus. Okay, and we find that the first thing that happens is uh, Judas came in. Okay, Judas came in with a crowd of people. Okay, but it was not told to us very early on. Okay, who the crowd of people was lah. Okay, these crowds later we find that actually in verse 52 it was mentioned. Okay, the crowd of people actually were the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders. Okay, if you look at footnote M, there were also two other groups, which were the teachers of the law and also Roman soldiers. Okay, interestingly enough, there were Roman soldiers over there, although a majority of the people that wanted to arrest Jesus was not the Romans. Okay, a majority of the people that wanted to arrest Jesus were the Jews. Okay, were the leaders of the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, the chief priests, the elders. And they were trying to do this ever since Jesus stepped into Jerusalem. Okay, and every time they wanted to trap Jesus, but they just cannot find, okay, they just cannot find a reason to arrest Jesus. Okay, and so they had to resort to number one, they had to resort to bribe one of Jesus' apostles, which was Judas lah. Okay, and later we found out that it was 30 silver pieces. Okay, so that was the first thing they resorted to. Secondly, notice that this arrest happened outside of Jerusalem. Okay, and we will soon see later the significance of this lah. Okay, number one, it happened outside of Jerusalem, and number two, it happened at night. Okay, it happened at night. Number three, okay, it happened when nobody else was there. All this while, when Jesus was in Jerusalem, he was always surrounded by people that were listening to him. Okay, but in this case, in this time, Jesus was arrested at night outside of Jerusalem, which was, the Mount of Olives. Okay, he was outside of Jerusalem. He was not even in the temple, and the people that were there were his disciples and everybody else who wanted to catch him. So I mean, if you look at it, it's like a bullying case, lah. It's like a bullying case because there was nobody there to defend Jesus except for the disciples. 12 disciples, 11. Okay, Judas was already out, lah. So 11 disciples, 11 apostles versus the rest of the crowd that wanted to catch Jesus. Obviously they were overpowered. Okay, so it kind of brings to mind that the leaders, the chief priests and all, they must have planned this lah. They didn't like, okay, on the spur of the moment, jom kita pergi tangkap Jesus. Tiada. Okay, they were so desperate in their attempt to catch Jesus that they resorted to doing all this sneaky, you can say lah, okay, it's very sneaky lah. Okay, they bribed Judas. After they went to arrest Jesus in the middle of the night. Okay, already last supper, people already finished makan already, it was at night. And there was nobody there listening to Jesus except, for the 12 disciples. And they had to resort to this because they were so desperate to catch Jesus. That's how much Jesus had offended them. And how they were so offended by Jesus, how they were so threatened by Jesus that they had to resort to doing something so out of the ordinary. Okay, usually if somebody they wanted to catch on broad daylight, so they will catch. Okay, but Jesus was so well liked and so followed by so many people that they could not find a way to catch Jesus in the daytime, and they had to do it at night. Okay. Secondly, in verse 47, Judas was the one that led everybody to Jesus. Okay, and the sign was the kiss lah. Okay, if you take a look at footnote J, the kiss was not an unusual form of greeting when men met. Okay, it is normally expressed friendship and esteem. Okay, but in this case, this was a case of betrayal. That's why in verse 48, Jesus says, Judas, is it with a kiss that you betray the Son of Man? Something that is so good and something that is so positive, okay, actually turned out to be, it was used to become something negative. Okay, a kiss between two friends is so normal. It is part of their culture. and their customs of the day, to greet each other with a kiss. Okay, but in doing so, Judas has turned something so beautiful, okay, which was a kiss of friendship, to something so horrendous, okay, which was a kiss of betrayal. Then in verse 49, when the disciples who were with Jesus saw what was going to happen, they asked, "Shall we use our swords, Lord?" Now, if you remember our lesson last week, remember right at the end, after Jesus talk, and then after that, in verse 38, the disciple says, "Look, here are two swords." Okay, and then Jesus said, "That is enough." And I mentioned last week that that is enough is not like, "Oh, good boy, this is enough already, good enough." No, it's an exasperation punya enough. It is an annoyance, it's like geram. Because sampai sekarang diorang tidak faham apa yang saya cakap. Okay, so that's enough lah, enough. And yet we see the same thing happening here again, The disciples, even after the first time, Jesus already, sort of scolded them and said, enough, cukup lah. Okay, like, my goodness, please lah. Okay, and yet they still do the same thing in verse 49. Okay, temptation number one, to go back to the things that they're so familiar with, to not understand what Jesus actually was saying. Okay, this is also part of what Jesus meant by pray that you do not fall into temptation. Temptation is so easy, we could have just used the swords to maybe kill Judas and on the spot, or maybe try to kill as many people as the 12, as the 11 disciples can, before Jesus was arrested. Okay, and actually that's what they did. If you look at verse 50, one of them struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. Okay, if you look at footnote K, the high priest slave had a name, and his name was Malchus. Okay, not Marcus. Okay, it's Malchus, Malchus. Okay, his name was found in John, the Gospel of John, which is not in our this one. But he was a high priest slave. Okay, just a small side note, because we're talking about exams. A lot of people tend to forget that it is the high priest slave that the ear was cut off. Okay, a lot of people tend to think it was one of the Roman soldiers or it was a high priest himself. No, it was just one of the high priest slaves. Okay, and it is the right ear that was cut off, okay, by the sword. And Jesus had to reply again by saying, enough of this. This is the second time in the same chapter that Jesus says this word, enough. Okay, cukup. Okay, it is not a proud enough, It is a very, very sad and very, very annoyed and exasperated kind of enough. It's like, enough lah, my goodness, you still don't understand what I'm saying. Okay, enough of this. And what he did was he touched the man's ear and healed him. Okay, and if you link this to what Jesus was saying about do not fall into temptation, this is one of the things lah. One lesson that we can draw from here is that sometimes when we face trouble, when we are facing trouble, or when we are faced with trials, okay, our own virtual trial, or when difficulty comes our way, our very natural human tendency is to try to solve the problem ourselves. Okay, is to try to solve the problem ourselves. But Jesus is saying that you need to depend on me. You need to trust in me and believe what I say is going to come true. And that is one of the temptations that Jesus is referring to. Pray that you do not fall into the temptation. The temptation is to rely on your own self, your own strength, your own your own inner self and not to rely on Jesus, not to rely on God. That is a very, very common temptation that we see these days. Everything is depend on yourself, it's all in you, it's up to you, when actually it's not true. Okay, I mean, it is true only to a certain extent. After that we are sure to fail because we are human. Okay, wouldn't it be better to depend on somebody, okay, that we know for sure will not fail? Okay, and that is one of the temptations that Jesus is referring to. And even in our daily lives, I'm for sure one of the people that I like to solve problems myself. If I find a problem, I always like to find my own way to solve things. Okay, and mind you, after after living for 40 years, I can tell you that I still fall into this kind of temptation. Whenever I face your problem, the first thing I do is react to it. The first thing I do is react to it. I want to try to solve the problem as soon as possible. Okay, when in fact, what I should be doing is I should be seeking after God. I should be praying, waiting, okay, to see when is the right moment to react. Okay, it's still something that I learned. It is still something that I am dealing with, even up till today. Okay, and this is one of the things that Jesus is referring to. Okay, so if you look at footnote L, okay, Jesus corrected the wrong done by his follower for to have allowed such an action that would be contrary to his teachings. Okay, Jesus is reminding us, okay, and the disciples of that day, okay, one of the temptations that we will face, and even the disciples faced on that day, okay, is to forget what we have learned about God, is to forget about who God is and what He has done for us. And I pray that, for all of us, okay, for all of us, that whenever we face difficulties, we don't forget God. Even when we face good times, you know, of course, I'm praying that you will all get good results for your SPM, and when you do get good results for your SPM, I pray that you will not forget God. I pray that you will not fall into the temptation of, wah, saya sangat bangga dengan diri saya sendiri. But that you will take some time to give glory to God, because it is God that gave you that result, or that thing that you wanted. Okay? Or it's God that led you through the difficult moments in your life. Okay, so let us now continue. Oh, sorry, there was supposed to be this one. There was supposed to be a comment. Saya balik-balik cakap, I forgot. So this is Judas, is it with a kiss that you betrayed the Son of Man? Okay, so something that was very beautiful, which is the kiss of friendship, became something so ugly. Okay, which is, the kiss of betrayal. Okay, and then of course you have this one. Shall we use our swords, Lord? This disciple that sampai sekarang tidak faham apa-apa. And then this is, I guess this is Malchus lah. Okay, Malchus, which was the high priest's slave. Okay, the high priest's slave that was had the right ear cut off. Interesting, huh? This is the left ear though. Right ear, right? Yeah, right ear. Okay, maybe this is a mirror image lah. Okay, I don't know. So Jesus said, enough of this. Okay, cukup lah, cukup. Okay, now let's go into the first set of trials. Okay, the first set of trials on Jesus. We're going to read all the way from 54 to 71. Okay, right up to the end of the chapter. And as we read, okay, this verse 54 to 71, I want you to imagine that you are Peter. Okay, at least from 54 until 62. From 54 until 62. One of the main characters in this particular section is Simon Peter. Simon Peter, the one that said just a few verses before this, that, until die also I will follow you. Okay, verse 33. Peter answered, Lord, I am ready to go to prison with you and to die with you. This is exactly what Peter said just about 20 verses before. Okay, and now as we are reading verse 54 to 71, I want you to bear this in mind. Remember what Peter has said, okay, and try to imagine what Peter must have felt and gone through, okay, even as we read this verse 54 to 71. Okay, we're going to start with, I think Kimberly is next. Yeah, Kimberly. So Kimberly, Mordecai, Nigel, and then Ellen and Anna and then Carl and so on and so forth. One person take 2 verses, same thing. Okay.
Okay. They arrested Jesus and took him away into the house of the high priest, and Peter followed at a distance. A fire had been lit in the center of the courtyard, and Peter joined those who were sitting around it.
When one of the servant girls saw him sitting there at the fire, she looked straight at him and said, This man too was with Jesus. But Peter denied it. Woman, I don't even know him.
After after a little while, a man noticed Peter and said, You are one of them too. But Peter answered, "Man, I am not." And about an hour later, another man insisted strongly, "There isn't any doubt that this man was with Jesus, because he is also a Galilean."
But Peter answered, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." At once, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned around and looked straight at Peter. And Peter remembered that the Lord had said to him, "Before the rooster crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you don't know me."
Peter went out and wept bitterly. The men who were guarding Jesus made fun of him and beat him.
They blindfolded him and asked him, "Who hit you? Guess." And they said many other insulting things to him.
I think it's Eugene.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. When they came, the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law met together, and Jesus was brought before the council. One verse only, Kasa.
2.
Oh, okay, sorry. "Tell us," they said, "are you the Messiah?" He answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me."
And if I ask you a question, you will not answer. From now on, the Son of Man will sit at the right side of my.
I think it's Kimberly last.
Oh, sorry, my line was not okay just now. Okay. And they said, "We don't need any witnesses. We ourselves have heard what he said."
Okay. Oh, I think we missed verse 70, but it's okay. They all said, "Are you then the Son of God?" Then he answered, "Then you say that I am." Okay, so this particular section okay, is actually divided into several parts. Okay, number one is that they actually arrested. So in verse 54, we find that they arrested Jesus and took him away into the house of the high priest. Okay, and remember, this is still at night. Okay, this is still at night. But Luke suddenly shifts his focus not on Jesus who was being led away to the house of the high priest, but actually he shifted his focus on Peter. Okay, and suddenly the story became about Peter. Suddenly this text, talking about Jesus gonna arrest and everything, then suddenly Luke turned his attention to Peter. Okay, we find that there were 3 instances and 3 different people identified Peter. Okay, and we need to know the difference between the 3 times. The first time is a servant girl. Okay, verse 56. Okay, first time it was a servant girl, looked straight at him and said, "This man too was with Jesus." Okay, by now there must have been a crowd of people over there, and they saw Jesus arrested and being brought into the house of the high priest. Okay, and the servant girl saw Peter and looked and said, "This man also was with Jesus, what?" Okay, and then Peter said, "Woman, I don't even know him." Okay, and that's the first time that Peter denied Jesus, was to a slave girl, okay, a servant girl. Second person is another random man. Okay, after a while, random man noticed Peter and said, "You are one of them too." Okay, and Peter answered, "Man, I am not." Okay, now this man, this man, when you read it, it's not "man, I'm not." It's not that kind of alama. It's not the kind. It's man because he doesn't know who the man's name is. Okay, and obviously he's not going to say "hoi" or he's not going to say "hello." He's not going to say "hello, I'm not." He addresses the person that was talking about here and say, "Man, I'm not." Okay, second denial. And the third denial was really the one that was even more, even more made Peter afraid. Okay, notice that um, I would think I would think that, and if you watch the Jesus movies or different versions of the Jesus movies, you will find that Peter will be moving from one place to another, because after he denied Jesus the first time, I mean, he wouldn't want to be sitting down there and, putting himself like in the middle of the spotlight. Like, he would have probably run away or moved somewhere else so as not to attract attention to himself. Okay, so he go to one place, okay, and I mean, there was a fire over there, and then he wanted to get near to the fire, but because somebody identified him, he had to run away. He's like, tak boleh, tak boleh. If I stand near, kan, maybe the reason why people can see me is because they can see my face on the fire. I mean, the light of the fire. Lah. Okay, so because of that, he had to go away somewhere darker. Then another man noticed Peter. Then he moved to somewhere else again. Now, by this third time, which is about an hour later, verse 59, another man, a different person from the first one who is a servant girl, the second one is a man, is this another man. Okay, and says, there isn't any doubt that this man was with Jesus because he is also a Galilean. Notice that now, the third time that he was being accused of being with Jesus, he had a support statement, and the support statement was that Peter was a Galilean. Now, how do you know? How did that person know that Peter was a Galilean? Okay, now it is probably because, if you look at footnote R, okay, it was probably because he had an accent on him. Okay, just like us lah, just like if you, let's say, you were to go to West Malaysia, people will know that you're from Sabah because the way you speak BM, is very different. Okay, from the way West Malaysians speak BM. Okay, and people will know. Okay, because although you're speaking the same language, but you're saying it differently, you're doing a different accent altogether. And people knew that, hey, this guy, he doesn't talk in the Jerusalem slang. He talks in a Galilean slang. Galilee is up north. Okay, even in Sabah itself. Okay, even in Sabah itself, kan, different. Okay, like one of the major ethnics in Sabah is Dusun lah, contohnya, or even Kadazan lah. Okay, orang Kadazan Pinampang and orang Kadazan Papar, kan, when they speak Kadazan, they speak differently. It is a different slang. The word may be the same, but the slang is different. And if you speak it long enough, you will know the difference. Oh, ini orang Kadazan Papar ni, because the way he speaks Kadazan is different from the way Pinampang people speak Kadazan. And likewise, okay, Galilee was in the north of Israel. Jerusalem was, towards the south. And people in the north, they speak differently. Same language, but maybe just slightly different accent. And this man knew. Okay, this man knew because he must have heard Jesus speak before. And Jesus, because he grew up in Galilee, okay, and he started his ministry in Galilee, he probably would have had the Galilean accent. Okay, and that's why he said, because he's also a Galilean, like Jesus. Okay, yeah. So that was the third challenge. It was Peter's accent that gave Peter away. And we find that for the third time, in verse 60, Peter answered, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." Okay, notice that 3 times Peter denied even knowing Jesus. Okay, 3 times Peter denied even knowing Jesus. And right after the third time, second half of verse 60, at once, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Okay, so this sorry, this whole text is really about hammering the nail into the coffin lah. The first one was talking about temptation. There are many events which you will see after this also, okay, where the disciples are balik fall into temptation. But this one was another hammer into the coffin. Sorry, another nail in the coffin. Okay, the rooster crowed. Verse 61, the Lord turned around and looked straight at Peter. Now, it's difficult to imagine if everything was in one level. So I remember watching a movie. And I remember reading a few texts. Now, this could have been possible. This could have been possible if Jesus was somewhere on the top floor, like maybe second floor or something. He looked down and Peter happened to be standing in an open space where people from the top can see him. Okay, but one thing for sure, okay, the Lord turned around and looked straight at Peter. And Peter remembered that the Lord had said to him, before the rooster crows tonight, you will say 3 times that you do not know me. Now imagine if you were Peter, okay? This is the person that you have idolized. This is the person that in chapter 9, you proclaimed. Okay, and Jesus asked, who do you say I am? You are the Messiah. Okay, Peter was the one who said it in chapter 9. Okay, before the transfiguration. I think it was chapter 9. Is it chapter 9? Yeah, before the transfiguration. Okay, who do you say I am? Peter was the one that answered, you are God's Messiah. And Peter followed Jesus, okay, from the beginning right up to the Last Supper. And even in the Last Supper, Peter once again was the person that said, I will die for you and I will go to prison for you. Okay, so semangat, so on fire for the Lord. Okay, and here was Peter, the same Peter. After 3 times being identified as the man who was with Jesus, he denied Jesus 3 times. And he did it so naturally, I mean, it's very natural. If you were accused of doing something wrong, okay, and you wanted to defend yourself, it's very natural to defend yourself. And the best way to defend yourself is by throwing somebody under the bus, And it's very natural. Peter did it so naturally that he did not even think about it, until he heard the rooster crow. And that's why in verse 62, we find Peter went out and wept bitterly, because he realized that all his gung-ho-ness, all his semangatness, all his on fire for the Lord, okay, was wasted. It was such a waste, because he had done the exact same thing that he said that he would not do. He was so afraid, of being thrown in prison for Jesus. Padahal 20 verses before this, about 20 verses before this, he was telling Jesus, I will die for you. I will go to prison for you. Okay, can you imagine the kind of, imagine if you were Peter and you had already denied Jesus for the 3rd time, then you heard the rooster crow and you looked up and you saw Jesus staring at you. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Peter to see Jesus staring at him and to know that he had done this extremely wrong thing? To know that he had disappointed Jesus. When one way of looking at it is, he may have realized that he has disappointed Jesus. Okay, I'm not going to sorry, I'm not going to speculate what Jesus must have thought but I think if I were Peter and I looked up and saw, I would have seen a face. I don't know, I would have felt very ashamed if I was Peter. Okay, but I dare not say what kind of face I would have seen now. Would I have seen Jesus with an angry face, or would I have seen Jesus smiling at me? I don't know. All we know is that Jesus looked straight at Peter. What kind of face did Jesus have at that time? I do not know. We can say that he had a disappointed face. Maybe he did. Maybe he smiled. Because he was right. Not the kind of smile like told you so. Not the kind of thing But maybe there was a smile in his face for forgiveness. Maybe he was looking at Peter to remind Peter that it's okay. Walaupun kamu sudah menyangkal saya 3 kali even if you have denied me 3 times, I still forgive you. I don't know what kind of face Jesus must have had when he looked at Peter. But what we know is that when Peter saw Jesus, he remembered and then he left and he wept bitterly. Okay, and we know after that, and we know after that this was one of the turning points in Peter's life. Okay, because if you study in the book of Acts, the first person to speak up, the first person to deliver the first sermon after Pentecost was Peter. The same person that disappointed, the same person that disappointed Jesus, the same person that denied Jesus, learned his lesson. And he went on to become the spokesman for the Lord. He went on to share the good news of the gospel. So what we can learn from Peter is this. It is undeniable for us as humans to disappoint our Lord. It is undeniable because we are human. We are human and we always fall into temptation. And it is an undeniable thing. Cannot ever say that we are followers of Jesus 100% perfect all the way. We cannot say that. We will for sure at some point in our life forget about Jesus. We will some point in our life we will we will not give God the glory that he deserves. We will at some point in our lives disappoint Jesus. Okay, but there were two responses to this lah. Judas, of course, disappointed Jesus one way, and he also was very bitter about it, but he died. Okay, he went and killed himself. Until his guts all spilled on the field and blah blah blah. Okay, this is one response. When we have disappointed God, when we have done something that we know, that is not glorifying to God now, one response is the Judas response. Kalau saya jahat ni, saya jahat selama-lamanya lah. Biarlah saya mati jahat. Okay. Or the other one is to take up Peter's response. Peter denied Jesus. Peter was on fire. Judas, we never heard about Judas, until he betrayed Jesus. But Peter, we always hear. Peter, this semangat, Peter, we look at Peter and we think, sure this guy, sure he's very hebat one, he always follow God. But Peter himself denied Jesus. But Peter didn't stop there. Peter did not allow, the bitterness to take over his life. And we find that the Lord used Peter, okay, because Peter, after Jesus rose, which we don't see here, but actually if you study in the book of John, if you read in the book of John, when Jesus met with Peter, interestingly, Jesus asked Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me? First time. And then Peter says, yes, Lord, I do. Jesus asked the second time, Peter, do you love me? And Peter said the same thing, yes, Lord, I do. The third time, Jesus asked Peter, Peter, do you love me? And by this third time, Peter was already very annoyed. He said, yes, Lord, you know I do. Okay. And then after that, Jesus went on to give Peter his commission, feed my sheep, take care of my lambs, take care of the flock. Yeah, but it's interesting that Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus asked the same question, do you love me? 3 times to Peter. Okay, and after Peter said it the third time, then Jesus, stopped. I mean, this comparison is very interesting to me. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus asked Peter 3 times. As if, it is as if for every time that Jesus asked Peter, he was reminding Peter of every time that he denied Jesus. And to remind Peter that he has been forgiven. Okay, of this betrayal. Judas was this outright betrayal, but Peter was his hidden betrayal, hidden in a sense. He denied Jesus 3 times. And the lesson that we need to learn from this is that we should not allow, whenever we forget God, whenever we deny Jesus in our own way, and we will, because we are human. The one thing we must not forget now is that Jesus still loves us. Jesus reminds us, Jesus waits for us to come back to him. And we should go back to Jesus just like Peter. And not give up on life like Judas. We say, okay lah, I've done the ultimate bad thing, bagus saya mati saja lah. No. Jesus still forgives. Okay. All right. So the second thing that happened in verse 63 was this man that were guarding. Okay, it's interesting that Jesus was arrested at night. He was brought to the house of the high priest. And then after that, Jesus just sit down there and wait. And then while he was waiting, in verse 63, there were soldiers that made fun of Jesus, which is pretty childish. If you, if you think about it, blindfold here and then slap him, and then after that, hit him, and then after that they ask Jesus to guess who beat you. Okay, as if trying to test, macam mau testing power if Jesus say he's God, Let's see whether he very hebat lah. If he's very hebat, I'm sure he can guess. But interestingly, Jesus did not answer. Okay, Jesus didn't say, this soldier A yang pukul saya tadi. No, he didn't. He just sat down there and he did one. Okay, if you think about it now, if Jesus had answered lah, if Jesus had answered, would they actually have believed Jesus? Would they actually, woi hebat Jesus ni, wah kita percaya dia lah. We will soon see that in the other trials also, no. When people's hearts are hardened from listening to the word of God, nothing you say or do, even if you have proven them wrong, they still would not want to believe. Okay, and we will soon see this in the life of Pilate and also in the life of Herod. Verse 66, and this is the interesting thing. Okay, when day came, so Jesus was arrested at night. Okay, and he was brought to the house of the high priest, and he had to wait several hours before daylight came. And only when daylight came did they start the trial. Okay, the perbicaraan of Jesus. We find that the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law met together. Jesus was brought before the council. And then they asked, tell us. They said, are you the Messiah? So the question is, why did they have to wait? Why did they have to wait until daytime? Why can't they just tangkap, bawa pergi rumah and then terus bicara di situ lah? Kenapa mesti tunggu sampai pagi? Why must they wait until daytime? Because in the Jewish law, if you take a look at footnote U, only after daylight could a lawful trial take place for the whole Sanhedrin to pass the death sentence. They wanted to pass the death sentence. Okay, they wanted to make sure that Jesus died. And in order for them to do that, they had to wait until daylight. So again, brings us to mind the question that I asked earlier. If like that, why susah-susah they want to capture Jesus at night? Why can't they wait until the next morning and then go and capture Jesus lah? Because, what's the difference of a few hours? The difference is that at night, when they first arrested Jesus, there was nobody there. There was no crowd that was following Jesus. And it was outside of Jerusalem. So they could do it without much objection. If they had waited until morning, baru mau pergi arrest Jesus, then it's a big problem for them. Because they would have to, talk to the crowd. They have to explain to the crowd why they were arresting Jesus. And they didn't want that. So they had to sneakily arrest Jesus, bring him to the house, and wait until morning. Okay, and in the entire span of time, you can imagine Jesus was not just made fun of, he probably wasn't given anything to eat or drink. He just wait there wait until your trial he was in prison. Then we find that the first question was asked of him. When the trial started, the chief priest and everybody asked, are you the Messiah? If you remember in chapter 20, the first question that they asked Jesus is, where does your authority come from? Okay, and I mentioned at the time is what they were questioning whether he was who he says he was, whether Jesus is the real deal, whether he was the Messiah. And now they didn't want to ask it, putar balik, they just asked direct, are you the Messiah? Because to proclaim yourself as the Messiah for Jewish law is considered blasphemy. Okay, blasphemy means you're saying something against God. You're proclaiming yourself as God means it's called blasphemy lah. Okay, you're saying something against God, which shouldn't be lah. Okay, so this was the kesalahan yang mereka mau tangkap Yesus, that they want to pass this one, because in order for them to pass the death sentence, there are very few things that you can pass the death sentence, and one of the things is called blasphemy. Okay, kalau kamu menyatakan diri sebagai Tuhan, kalau kamu mengakui diri sebagai Tuhan, if you proclaim yourself as God, that's called blasphemy. And blasphemy is punishable by death. Okay, you can die for proclaiming yourself as God. And that's what they wanted to do, okay, to Jesus. But look at Jesus' answer. If I tell you, you will not believe me. If I ask you a question, you will not answer. Okay, but from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right-hand side of Almighty God. Then they all say, are you then the Son of God? Which is even worse, To proclaim himself as Messiah is one thing. To proclaim himself as the Son of God is also blasphemous. Okay, and he answered them, you say that I am. Notice that Jesus didn't say yes or no. Jesus said, you say I am. If Jesus had said yes, then that's it. The trial will be there and then done. Okay, but Jesus answered in a way that is like not yes and not even no. He said, you say that I am. And then, of course, they jump into conclusion and then they said, we don't need any more witnesses. We ourselves have heard what he said. Padahal, that's not what he said. Okay? Padahal, that's not what he said. He said that, we said that he is the Son of God. Am I getting this right? Yeah. He said that, we said that he is the Son of God. Yeah. So, according to mathematics, these two will cancel each other out. Therefore, you're left with the Son of God. That's their mathematics. Okay? And, that's how they have it. This is their version of proof. Okay? He said that, we said that he is the Son of God. So it's like, oh, okay. Kalau macam tu, he's the Son of God. He said that he's the Son of God. Just take out the stuff in the middle. Okay, and I mean, you can sense the kind of desperation that was in the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. They wanted to make sure that Jesus died. So whatever that Jesus said, kita just putar balitkan and we say that he said this. Since he's not really saying yes or no, we just putar balit saja. Okay, what he did. And with that, they convinced themselves that, okay, now we can pass the death sentence on Jesus. But there was a big problem. And the problem was the Romans at the time did not allow the Jews to pass the death sentence. It must come from the Romans. It cannot come from the Jews, which is very sad because when the Romans, when they invaded Jerusalem, when they were invaded Jerusalem, okay. So they set it as a rule that the Jews cannot pass their sentence. They can cadangkan okay, we want to suggest that this person be put to death. Okay, but they themselves cannot carry out the punishment. The punishment can only be carried out by the Romans. Which brings us to this next chapter. Okay, which brings us to this next chapter in 23. And which is also the reason why Jesus had to go through so many trials. Because the problem number one was the Jews cannot carry out the death punishment. So they have to go to a Roman court. Okay, which is what we find now in chapter 23. So let us read now in chapter 23. I want to go right from verse 1 to verse 12. Okay, verse 1 to verse 12. We are going to look at Pilate, and then we're going to look at Herod. Okay, we're going to look at Pilate, and then we're going to look at Herod. So, sorry, who was the last person just now? I think it was Jed. Was it Jed or was it Kimberly? It was Kimberly. Okay, so let's start with Mordecai. One person, same thing, one person, two verses, starting from verse 1 all the way to verse 12.
Okay. Jesus' trial before Pilate. The whole group rose up and took Jesus before Pilate, where they began to accuse him. We caught this man misleading our people, telling them not to pay taxes to the emperor and claiming that he himself is the Messiah, a king.
Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of Jews?" "So you say," answered Jesus. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no reason to condemn this man."
But they insisted even more strongly. With his teaching, he is starting a riot among the people all through Judea. He began in Galilee and now has come here. When Pilate heard this, he asked, "Is this man a Galilean?"
uh, when he learned that Jesus was from the region ruled by Herod, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem.
Okay, well, Go ahead, Jet.
Oh, it's me.
Yeah,
Uh,
verse 8.
where was it? Herod was very pleased when he saw Jesus, because he had heard about him and had been wanting to see him for a long time. He was hoping to see Jesus perform some miracle. So Herod asked Jesus many questions, but Jesus made no answer.
The chief priests and the teachers of the law stepped forward and made strong accusations against Jesus. Herod and his soldiers made fun of Jesus and treated him with contempt. Then they put a fine robe on him and sent him back to Pilate.
On that very day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies.
All right, thank you. I think we skipped a couple of people. How come Eugene suddenly was after Alan? But it's okay. Uh, okay, so we find that now this is where the second trial begins. Okay, and uh, if you are following this drama as closely as you possibly can, okay, you will notice that there's a lot of manipulation that happens. Remember, the end goal, okay, what the Jewish leaders really wanted was for Jesus to die. And that was the end goal. Okay, and they were so determined to make sure that Jesus died that they were willing to do anything. Okay, they were willing to do anything just to make sure that the death sentence was carried out for Jesus by the Romans, because they themselves cannot do it. Okay, so since they have sort of found a reason or a justification that, okay, Jesus claims that he is the Messiah. So by Jewish law, he has blasphemed against God and therefore he can die. So now let's bring him to the Roman court. Let's bring him to the Roman leader, okay, and ask the Roman leader to pass a death sentence so that the death punishment can be carried out for him. Okay, and that's how desperate they were. So we find that in verse 1, the whole group rose up, okay, and took Jesus before Pilate. Okay, now Pilate, if you take a look at footnote B, Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of the province of Judea, okay, which is towards the south where Jerusalem was. Okay, and his main headquarters was in Caesarea, but he was in Jerusalem during Passover to prevent any trouble that might arise with the large number of Jews from different parts of the world gathered there for the festival. Okay, so he was the Roman governor, but actually he was stationed somewhere else, but he had to be in Judea or in Jerusalem for the Passover, because he wanted to make sure that everything was peaceful and then the festival went on without a hitch. Okay, and Herod was the governor in Galilee, which is up north. Okay, this is the same Herod who got who put John the Baptist in prison. Okay, it's the same Herod, which we will come to in a while. But now we have this person called Pontius Pilate, and he was the governor of this daerah, which is called Judea. Okay, so Jerusalem is in Judea. Yeah, okay, and Pilate was the governor there. So now these people that arrested Jesus, and they already tried Jesus in the house of the high priest, okay, we find that they brought Jesus to go and see Pilate. Okay, before we do that, before we talk about the Pilate, so this is a picture that kind of shows a traditional side of the house of Caiaphas, okay, who judged this. This is, yeah, I mean, if you have ever made trips to Israel, okay, they will probably show this Okay, this is the house of the high priest where Jesus was kept. Okay, this is this is a table to summarize the different trials that went on, but all throughout the Gospels. Okay, now I said much earlier that actually, if we think about it, Jesus went through 6 trials. Okay, but in Luke, it is only recorded 5. Okay, but if we combine all this together, okay, there are 6. Even before this one, there was another trial before this person called Annas. Okay, and then only it was Caiaphas. Now, Annas and Caiaphas are father and son-in-law. Okay, so Caiaphas married Annas punya daughter. I think so. Yeah. So Annas was the original high priest, the high priest before Caiaphas. Okay, but because he was still living, a lot of people still respected Annas lah. Okay, but the trial before Annas is only recorded in the book of John. Okay, manakala yang kita nampak sekarang ini in chapter 22 is the trial before Caiaphas, which was the trial that happened during the daytime. Okay, before Caiaphas and also before the Sanhedrin. Okay, and it was quite specific lah. You know, it was differentiated into 63 to 65, and then after that 66 to 71. And then now we are at Jesus' civil trial. So before this was religious. Okay, religious because the only thing that they could find fault with Jesus was to say that Jesus blasphemed. Okay, Jesus proclaimed himself as God, which is punishable by death. But in order for them to carry out the death punishment, they had to go through the Romans, because only the Romans can carry out the death punishment. So that's why they had to go to Pilate. Okay, so Pilate spent about 5 verses with him before he realized that, hey, Jesus is from Galilee. If Jesus is from Galilee, then I should send him to Herod. Okay, Herod Antipas lah. Okay, which is what happened in verse 6. Okay, and so happened that Herod was also in Jerusalem at that time. Okay, if you take a look at verse 7, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. So Pilate thought that, oh, okay, my problem is over lah. I don't have to deal with this problem. Okay, because if you remember, and as I said earlier, the relationship between the Roman leaders and the Jewish leaders was very, very, there was a very, very thin line lah, okay, in between them. Like any moment, like they have to tolerate one another, but they actually cannot stand one another. And Pilate was probably thinking, what is this lah? This kind of matter also want to come to me. Okay, so Pilate is like, saya malas mau urus ini perkara. Okay, so he sent Jesus to Herod. Okay, under the excuse that Jesus is from Galilee. Jesus is from Galilee. He was born in Nazareth, which was in that area lah. It's not even in the area of Judea. So somebody who was the somebody who's the ruler of Galilee should be the one that passed the death sentence, not me. Because what if I pass the death sentence, then suddenly Herod, find fault with me. Hey, kenapa kau kacau orang saya? Okay, so he thought that by using this excuse, okay, he thought that his problems were solved. Okay, because if you read this entire text, you will find glimpses that actually Pilate secretly thought that Jesus was innocent. Pilate cannot find any fault at all with Jesus. Okay, and the reason is this. Let's take a look at verse 2. Okay, verse 2, when the Jewish leaders brought Jesus before Pilate, there were 3 accusations. Okay, that suddenly from 1 accusation became 3. So the main accusation in the religious trial was that Jesus blasphemed. But suddenly, in front of Pilate suddenly they can come up with 3 accusations, 3 stories. The first accusation is misleading our people. The second accusation is telling them not to pay taxes to the emperor, which was not true. Jesus did not say that. If you remember in chapter 20, Jesus said, what belongs to the emperor, we give back to the emperor. And the third accusation was claiming that he himself is the Messiah, a king. Okay, it's not enough that they stopped at the word Messiah, but they had to put in this word a king, because they knew that if they had put in the word a king, then Pilate would be threatened. Pilate akan rasa tergugat. This person is claiming to mengambil alih saya punya kerja, to take over my place. Okay, and that's something that is not allowed, because only a Roman can become a Roman governor. Mana boleh, a Jewish man become a Roman governor? Cannot. Okay, so out of the 3 accusations, the second and the third one sounds more serious to Pilate. Because the second one is don't pay taxes to emperor. That's very bad as a Roman. And the third one is he's proclaiming himself as a king. Okay, which means that he wants to take over Pilate's, this one. Okay, so again, you notice how the Jewish leaders they twisted this original situation and they put in stories that were actually not true just to make sure that Pilate could carry out the death sentence. Remember the end game, the end game of the Jewish leaders was so that Jesus would die. That's what they wanted. And they will do anything at all, okay, to make sure that happens, including twist the story, tell a white lie, okay, about Jesus to Pilate. Okay? But Pilate, being the person that he is, he asked in verse 3, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Okay, and Jesus answered in the same way. He didn't say, "Yes, I am," or he didn't say, "No, I'm not." He said, "So you say." Kamu yang cakap. Okay, then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no reason to condemn this man." And we find that actually Pilate realized that this problem is only between Jesus and the Jews. It has nothing to do with him. It is at this moment that Pilate realized that the three accusations, right, actually the second and third one got nothing to do. Is the real accusation that the Jews wanted him to do is the first one. But the first accusation, misleading our people, has nothing to do with Pilate. Who cares if, yeah, who cares if Jesus is misleading your people? I don't care. I'm a Roman. I don't care about you Jews. All I know is that you pay taxes to us. Itu saja. As long as you pay taxes to us and you respect me as your governor, done. I don't care if this man is misleading you. It's not my problem. And Pilate realized that. That's why he said, "I find no reason to condemn this man." Because he didn't say anything about taking over my job. He didn't say anything about, not paying taxes to the emperor. You are the one that say it. But he didn't say. Then verse 5. But they insisted even more strongly. With his teaching, he's starting a riot among the people all through Judea. He began in Galilee and now has come here. Okay, and notice again the desperation of the chief priests and the Jewish leaders. They wanted so badly that they even had to talk about Judea. Talk about Galilee. They thought that, oh, okay, just keep it in Judea lah. Tak payah, tidak payahlah pergi sampai Galilee. But no, they now had to include Galilee to make it sound more serious than it actually is. Okay, so there are two words. There are two words that if you were a Roman governor, you would pay attention to. Number one is riot. No leader likes riots. Okay, so the Jewish leaders were trying to make it sound so worse than it actually is lah. Say his teaching is starting a riot. Okay, and then secondly, they made it even bigger by not confining it to Judea, but they went all the way to the north. Dari utara sampai ke selatan, he's already starting this riot. If you don't do something now, Pilate, it's going to be on your hands. But the problem is this: the moment they mention Galilee, okay, that's why in verse 6, when Pilate heard this, he asked, "Is this man a Galilean?" Because then he knew that if this man was a Galilean, his problem is solved. He doesn't have to talk about this. He doesn't have to proclaim any punishment on Jesus. He can pass it to the king of Galilee, okay, which was Herod, at that time. So, verse 7, when he learned that Jesus was from the region ruled by Herod, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Okay, and Herod was very happy because right from, I don't remember which text was this, quite a long while back lah, Herod has always been hearing about this Jesus. Herod banyak mendengar cerita pasal Jesus kan, and he always wanted to meet Jesus. Okay, so verse 8, Herod was very pleased when he saw Jesus because he had heard about him and had been wanting to see him for a long time. Okay, and the reason why he wanted to see Jesus was not because he wanted to believe in Jesus. It was not because, he wanted to ask Jesus questions about God. No, what he wanted was, he was hoping to see Jesus perform some miracle. So the thing that excited Herod about Jesus was not Jesus' teaching. It was about Jesus' miracles. Okay, he wanted to see a magic show from Jesus. Which is why, if you notice all this while, one very big difference between all these trials is that the trial before Herod, Jesus did not say a word. Verse 9. So Herod asked Jesus many questions, but Jesus made no answer. Because Herod was not interested to know Jesus. He was only interested to see what Jesus can do for him. And Jesus got no time for this kind of people. You know, Jesus said, if you don't want to believe in what I have to teach you, then no point. You know, because your heart is already hardened. Kau tidak mau dengar pun, walau macam mana banyak pun miracle saya buat, if you don't want to believe in me, there's no point in me showing you anything. Or there's no point in me talking to you about anything. Okay, totally different from Pilate. You know, Pilate wanted to know, and Jesus answered Pilate. Herod, he was not interested in knowing. He just wanted to see what Jesus can do. And Jesus chose not to answer Herod. Verse 10, the chief priests and the teachers of the law stepped forward and made strong accusations against Jesus. Herod and his soldiers made fun of Jesus and treated him with such contempt that they put on a fine robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Okay, you can actually almost say you can actually almost say that Herod merajuk. Sorry, I keep missing all this because all these trials is very sorry. Wait. Okay, so Pilate is done. You know what? I should show you this first. Hold on. I wanted to show you this bar. This. Sorry. This one. Okay, so this is a traditional site for Jesus' trial before Pilate. So if you remember, the house of Caiaphas was like this. This is the high priest's house. Jesus was probably somewhere on the upper floor, and then Peter was down there at the bottom. Okay, but this is Pilate. So Pilate's, because he was the king of Judea at that time. Okay, the governor of Judea. So his residence would be some like very grand like that lah. Okay, so the headquarters, in Jerusalem is this place called the Praetorium. Okay, I'm not sure whether it is in this one though. Yeah, sorry, I don't think it is. But anyway, this is where Jesus was brought. Okay, before Pilate, before he was sent to Herod. Okay, so when he was sent to Herod, then this is all what happened lah. He asked Jesus a lot of questions, but Jesus never answered. Okay, and then the chief priests and the teachers of the law stepped forward and made strong accusations against Jesus. Okay, but because Jesus refused to answer, so as I said just now, Herod kind of merajuk lah, okay, fine, kalau kau tidak mau layan saya, nah beginilah. So what they did was they put on a fine robe on him. Tradition tells us that it's a purple color robe, but we don't really know. Tradition tells us it's a purple color robe because purple is considered a royal color. Okay, so they kind of put a fine robe on him, macam mengolok. Okay, like they were trying to tease Jesus lah. Oh, you say you're a king right now. Okay lah, wear this fine robe lah. And then they sent him back to Pilate because Herod is like, saya malas lah. If he doesn't want to talk to me, bagus kau yang urus dengan dia lah. Okay, so. And because of that, on that day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. Okay, and they were friends because they could not find a solution to this problem. The problem that started with the Jewish leaders. Okay, and it was a problem to them because they cannot find any wrong with Jesus. If they cannot find any wrong with Jesus, then what is the reason for putting Jesus to death? Under Roman law, okay, they cannot put Jesus to death because they cannot find anything wrong with him. Yang ada masalah sebenarnya adalah the Jewish leaders. Okay, so Herod sent Pilate back to Jesus. So this is a big problem. Okay, the Jewish leaders wanted Jesus to die, but they cannot carry out the death punishment because they were not allowed to by Roman law. So they had to ask the Romans to do it. But the problem is the Romans cannot find anything wrong with Jesus. So why should they put Jesus to death? Why should they put Jesus to death? So they were stuck, The Jewish leaders wanted Jesus to die, but the Roman leaders cannot put Jesus to death because there was no reason for them to put Jesus to death. So how? If, oh dear, my internet connection is unstable. If there's something wrong, please let me know. Okay. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue talking. So, sorry. So as I said before, so they're kind of, they're kind of stuck lah, and the Romans, and the Roman leaders, especially Pilate lah, he wanted to maintain a good relationship, or as good as possible with these Jewish leaders. He didn't want to offend the Jewish leaders. Nanti dia takut the Jewish leaders don't want to listen to him. So Pilate is like this kind of person that is stuck in the middle, trying to please everyone at the same time. Okay, and with that in mind, we come to this last part, where finally Pilate sentences Jesus to death. And look at how he does it. Okay, again, playing into his role, Pilate is the kind of person that really wants to maintain the peace and try to make everybody as happy as possible. Okay, and we find that this happens again in verse 13 to verse 25. So let's read this last section together, verse 13 to verse 25. You know what? Oh, we've covered this already. Today is very bad lah. I'm very excited about talking about this until I forget about the until I forget about the slides. Okay, now let's read from verse 13 to verse 25. Same thing. One person take two verses, starting from. Can we start from Anna? I haven't heard Anna. I only heard Anna once today. So let's start from Anna, and then Carl, and then Eugene, Jet, Kimberly, Mordecai, and so on and so forth.
The sentencing of Jesus. Pilate called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought this man to me and said that he was misleading the people. Now I have examined him here in your presence, and I have not found him guilty of any of the crimes you accuse him of."
Nor did Herod find him guilty, for he sent him back to us. There is nothing this man has done to deserve death. So I will have him whipped and let him go.
Eugene, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, the whole crowd cried out, "Kill him! Set Barabbas free for us." Barabbas had been put in prison for a riot that had taken place in the city and for murder.
Pilate wanted to set Jesus free, so he appealed to the crowd again, but they shouted back, "Crucify him! Crucify him!"
Pilate said to them the third time, "But what crime has he committed? I cannot find anything he has done to deserve death. I will have him whipped and set him free." But they kept on shouting at the top of their voices that Jesus should be crucified, and finally their shouting succeeded.
So Pilate passed the sentence on Jesus that they were asking for. He set free the man they wanted, the one who had been put in prison for riot and murder. And he handed Jesus over for them to do as they wished.
Okay. So now in this last part, we find that Pilate is once again stuck with this original problem that he had. Okay, so again, Jewish leaders had the trial and they thought that, okay, we can put Jesus to death for blasphemy. But the problem is they cannot put Jesus to die. So they had to go to the Roman leaders. Sent to Pilate. Pilate cannot find anything wrong. And then he heard the word Galilee, passed over to Herod, because Herod is the ruler of Galilee. And since Jesus was a Galilean, he didn't want to put somebody who was not under his care to death. Okay, sent over to Herod, and then Herod is like, yay, like a small child. He was very happy because you can see, but the problem is Jesus never answered Herod. So Herod merajuk, put a fine road on him, and then after that send him back to Pilate. So now it's Pilate's problem again. And because Pilate cannot find anything wrong with this man, so he wanted to tell the leaders what he decided. And this is what he said. You have brought this man to me, verse 14. You have brought this man to me and said that he was misleading the people. Now I have examined him here in your presence, and I have not found him guilty of any of the crimes you accuse him of, which was true. Okay, Pilate could not find anything wrong. Okay, it is the accusation from the Jews, according to the Jewish law, but according to Roman law, there's nothing wrong. Okay, this one. And he went on to say, nor did Herod find him guilty, for he sent him back to us. Okay, although in actual fact we know that Herod, just couldn't be bothered with this man, because this man didn't want to lie. Jesus didn't want to lie on Herod. Okay, so Pilate said there is nothing this man has done to deserve death, which is true. Okay, Pilate is essentially, Pilate is doing the right thing over here. Pilate is appealing to the people, guys, this guy has done nothing wrong. I don't understand why you want to put him to death. But since you are accusing him of something, I will, layan sikit lah kamu punya permintaan. I will have him whipped and then I will let him go. Because he doesn't deserve death. And this is the thing that is true. Pilate was choosing to do the right thing. Okay, and the right thing is, okay lah, don't put Jesus to death because he has done nothing wrong. Okay, and all will be well and fine if this was the end of the story lah. But unfortunately, we know that this is not the end of the story, because after that, the whole crowd cried out, "Kill him! Set Barabbas free for us!" Okay, and then we find that Luke suddenly introduces this man called Barabbas, so he had to give a little bit of background. So Barabbas had been put into prison for a riot, okay, that had taken place in the city. The person that actually started the riot was already in prison. Okay, and if you think about it now, okay, here was Jesus, who, as far as we can see, did not start any riots. The only people that claimed that Jesus started a riot were the chief priests, the leaders, and the teachers of the law. But actually, there was no riot. The person who actually started the riot was Barabbas. Okay, and the crowd wanted Barabbas to be set free. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense at all. It's like, what? Why would you want to do this? You put a peaceful man in prison, and you ask to set free a person that has been proven to be a riot starter. Okay, and not just riot, no. He was also put in prison for murder. Okay, so the whole crowd cried out. So it makes you wonder, what is this crowd thinking? Apa yang sebenarnya this crowd is thinking lah? Take a look at footnote N, N for Nangka. This was probably due to the chief priests and leaders' manipulation of the crowd onto their side. It was also due to the presence, most likely of Barabbas' supporters, who were there to take advantage of the opportunity to get their friend released. Okay, that's why, maybe it started with a few people and then it became gradually more and more. Okay, until the whole crowd shouted, "Kill him, set Barabbas free for us." So there were supporters of Barabbas and the chief priests and the leaders of the Jewish people, over there. Again, emphasizing for us how desperate, okay, the chief priests and the leaders of the Jewish people must have been for them to even think about doing such a thing. Okay, they were that desperate to kill Jesus. They were that desperate to put Jesus away, because Jesus, stood as an opposition to them. Jesus stood as a what is the word called? I mean, Jesus called them out, on all the things that they have done wrong. They were so threatened by Jesus, that they were this desperate until they were willing to set free a murderer. That's how desperate they were. Okay. And yet in verse 20, we find that Pilate wanted to set Jesus free. He wanted to do the right thing. So he appealed to the crowd again. Okay, he said, "Guys, come on now. Okay, this doesn't make sense. Why would you want me to let go a murderer and put this person to death when he has not proven to be a murderer? He's not proven to start any riot." Okay, but the crowd kept shouting back even more. The two famous words that we hear lah: "Crucify him, crucify him." It was not enough, okay, that Jesus would be killed, but he would be crucified. Okay, which we will look at next week lah. Okay, Pilate said to them the third time, Everything in today's class happened in threes. There were 3 times that Jesus denied. There were essentially 3 trials. Okay, I know it said 6. Okay, but there were essentially 3 trials. The trial before the Jewish leaders, the trial before Pilate, and the trial before Herod. Okay, and Pilate appealed 3 times, okay, to the crowd, not to put Jesus to death. And he asked, he tried to reason some more. But what crime has he committed? I cannot find anything he has done to deserve death. I will have him whipped and set him free. He wanted to do the original plan that he had. And verse 23, but they kept on shouting at the top of their voices that Jesus should be crucified. And finally, their shouting succeeded. Now, if you read in the book of Matthew, okay, Matthew chapter 27, verse 19. I don't have time to show it to you here, but I just want to quickly say this now. But in Matthew chapter 27, verse 19, Matthew records for us that Pilate's wife, okay, Pilate's wife also had something to do with this. Pilate's wife warned Pilate because she had a dream about Jesus. And she warned Pilate and she said, you should not have anything to do with this man. And I guess all these things combined, Pilate wanted to make everybody happy. Pilate's wife said something to him, and they had the whole crowd over there that wanted something. Okay, and he had the power to do so. Okay, and so we find that Pilate went from wanting to do the right thing, okay, to verse 24, to doing the thing that was very obviously wrong, but it made him popular. Pilate passed the sentence on Jesus that they were asking for. He set free the man they wanted, Barabbas, the one who had been put in prison for riot and murder, and he handed Jesus over to them to do as they wished. Here is Pilate. Okay, he had the power and all authority, to do the right thing, which was to set Jesus free. Okay, he had that power, and he knew that it was the right thing to do. He knew in his heart that he knew that it was the right thing to do, but he did not do it because he wanted to be popular, because he wanted people to like him. He wanted to maintain a good relationship with the Jewish leaders. He wanted to remain popular, okay, with the people that he was ruling over. If anything at all, we can learn from Pilate. It is this. Today, as I was preparing for this, I thought to myself, I must pass on these 2 important lessons. One is about Peter. Okay, one was about Peter, which I talked about much earlier. Okay, and I hope that you remember that all of us, we go through moments in our life where we are like Peter. We say that we believe in Jesus. We say that we believe in God. We even go to church. We even serve in church, in worship team, in choir, arranging chairs, usher, this one. But there are times in our life where we will forget that we will forget Jesus. Okay, and the first lesson that I wanted to draw to you is, even so, remember that Jesus forgives us. Remember that Jesus, is still able to take something so ugly and turn it into something so beautiful. And Peter has showed us the way. Peter, from the person who denied Jesus, became the person who finally actually died for Jesus. Okay, he was the first person to speak up after the Pentecost event. The second lesson we should learn from Pilate. Okay, Pilate, in having so much power to do the thing that was right, finally did not do the thing that was right because he was so concerned about what other people thought about him, that he was willing to do the wrong thing just so that he would be popular. And that is something that all of us, should remember. When Jesus says, pray that you do not fall into temptation, I believe that somehow it does not only apply to his disciples. Pilate had that opportunity to do the right thing, and yet he was so concerned about being popular. He was so concerned about what others thought of him that he was willing to do the wrong thing. He was willing to forget about the right thing and let the wrong thing happen. And this is the thing that we need to learn from this. You know, whether we have, whether we are, whether we are guilty of being like Pilate, whether we are so concerned with what other people think about us, that we would rather remain silent, than to speak up and do the right thing. Have there been moments in our life, okay, in our life, or in any of the lives of the people that 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 there is a right thing to do, and yet you're willing to let the wrong thing happen? One of my favorite quotes, I'm going to end with this. I am always astounded. I always like to listen to quotes. People, like to say quotes and this. But one of my favorite quotes, and I will never forget this. Every time I say this, I always never forget. Whenever I look at the story of Pilate, I always remember this quote. And the quote is this: the only way for evil to remain is for good men to sit down and do nothing. Something like that. The only way for evil to remain, okay, in this world is when good men sit down and do nothing. And that's exactly what Pilate is doing. Okay, he let the evilness of uh, of the chief priests, the desperation of the chief priests, led them to create lies, led them to manipulate the crowd into releasing a bad person and to sacrifice a person that was innocent, just so that they will remain popular. The only way for evil to remain in this world is for good people to sit down and do nothing. I want to end with this and to encourage us okay, that it is not easy. I'm not saying that it's very easy to do the right thing. I'm not saying that it's very easy to okay saya okay je kalau tidak popular ni, saya okay je kalau orang tidak suka dengan saya. No, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm acknowledging that it is difficult. It is difficult when people hate you for what you believe. Okay, it is people I have had okay, interestingly okay, I have had people laugh at my face, for saying, I remember this very carefully. Those of, no, I don't think anybody in this class knows. Those of you who know, I don't think you know. Okay, but I've had people laugh at me, when I teach in class and I say that we need to appreciate the beauty of our world that God has created for us. When we learn physics, when we learn biology, when we learn chemistry, all this is God's creation, and we should appreciate all these things now. I have had students laugh at me for saying this. What like this, sir? What kind of crap belief do you have? I have had students laugh at me. It is not easy to say the right thing and to believe it in front of people that do not believe the same thing that you do. Okay, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we should, that we should be like Pilate and just follow je lah, kan, because this person is popular, or because this person is laughing. I don't want, saya tidak suka kalau kena ketawa ni. That's the wrong thing to do. Okay, it is not easy to stand up for what we believe in. But God promises us, okay, when you study the book of Acts, okay, you will notice this trend. God promises strength and peace to the people who trust and believe in Him. And I hope that in your life, even when you stand up for the Lord, okay, pray to the Lord for strength, because that's about all you need, to carry you through. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we are mindful of the things that have happened during your trial, and how difficult it must have been for you to look all around you, to have that power, Lord, to do what is right, but Lord, to allow the things to happen to you. how difficult it must have been for you, how difficult it must have been for the Father to see all these things happening, to know this injustice that is happening right in front of your eyes. But Lord, we are thankful that you were willing to go through all this for our sakes. You were willing to go through all this so that we can be saved, so that we can have a relationship with you. And we thank you for that, O Lord. Help us, Lord, and give us the strength to do the right thing. Help us and give us the strength to stand up for you, even though, Lord, we believe in a world that is increasingly not believing in you, in a world that is increasingly laughing at Christians for believing in you. Help us, Lord, to remain in you. Help us, Lord, to draw our strength from you. And help us, Lord, to depend on you and not to depend on ourselves. Because, Lord, without you, we are nothing. And with you, we have all the strength that we need. Be with us, O Lord, we pray, until we see one another once again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.